Hello, this is Joe Savage from devhd.net, and today we're diving into an HTML and CSS tutorial about basic text styling. So this is just simply the HTML and CSS we finished off with last time, and in this tutorial we're pretty much just going to be doing a little bit of a property dump for styling text. So obviously to style different things with CSS you need to know about the different properties and different values that can accomplish different things, and so it is just going to kind of be a listing kind of tutorial. I'm afraid we're going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 8 CSS properties. So I'm just going to go through them, I'm going to go through the values, and I'm going to get through this tutorial, and hopefully you should be able to experiment with them in your own kind of little projects and stuff, just to sort of get used to them, figure out what they do, and be able to use them in your own projects. So let's get started. Number 1 is the color property. So we've used this before. We've used it very simply. Usually when we're specifying a word color, you can also give this an RGB or a hex color. So if you're familiar with colors at all, you should kind of be used to those formats. Hex color, you're a hash or a pound sign, followed by these 3 pairs, one which represents red, one that's green, and one that's blue. So like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 is going to be some kind of gray. If we refresh here, you can see, there we go, we have kind of like a dark gray going on there, and 00FF00 is going to be a green color, just like that. And the RGB format is specified in CSS by writing RGB and in some brackets specifying your red, green, and blue values, which go from 0 to 255, separated by commas. So if you don't understand what I'm talking about here, just do a little bit of research on hex or RGB colors, because you're probably going to want to use one other than just word, because word is very sort of unspecific, and it's unlikely that you're going to want the exact word colors that are sort of available, because you can find a list of those online as well. But something here, if we just want to test this out, 0, 0, 255 should be a blue. So if we refresh, you can see there we go, the text is now blue, and we're doing that through RGB. So there we go, that's pretty simple, that's color, tick, it's done. Next, font family. So font family, it's pretty simple, but pretty much you're just setting the font, obviously for whatever selector you're using. So in this case we're setting the font in the body. So let's just quickly change the color back to something like 2E, 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 which should be a gray, and let's move on. So yes, font hyphen family is how you set this one. And pretty much if you want to set the font to like Helvetica, type Helvetica, save, go here, refresh. Bam, it's gone to the grey color because we changed it, and our font is now Helvetica. Pretty simple. However, usually you want to specify a list of fonts here. So what if the user doesn't have Helvetica? What are we going to do? Well, what we can do is we can just go comma space, and then the font we want to use if they don't have Helvetica. So perhaps we want to use, I don't know, Arial. What if they don't have Arial? Well, what we can do is we can just do it again, and you can make kind of as long as a list of you want here, just kind of fallbacks for fonts. Now, usually this is going to end on sans serif or serif, one of those two values. And if you know anything about fonts, you should know what those mean. But essentially, there's very simple types of fonts which your browser will sort of work up for you. So if you just go sans serif, if it gets to that point, it's going to go, okay, just give me any sans serif font, and I'll just use that. So this will kind of do in this case. So we just go font family, use Helvetica. If they don't have that, use Arial. And if they don't have Arial, use a sans serif font. I don't really care which sans serif font, just use a sans serif font. Note, by the way, that any font names with spaces in, you can just put in single or double quotes. So we could do something like that, and then perhaps we don't want Helvetica sort of regular to be a fallback, and we can do that just fine. But in this case, let's just keep it simple. Let's have a list of 3: Helvetica, Arial, sans serif. Pretty simple, very effective, and I mean, obviously, it's very necessary in web pages to change the font. I mean, usually you don't want it to be the default font, and you want some kind of consistency between machines as well. So very useful, very necessary. Okay, number 3, font size. So font hyphen size. Now you can specify this in pixels or points or ems or a bunch of different measurements. Pixels you're probably familiar with, point fonts you're probably familiar with, ems you may not be. So ems are based around the parent font size. So in the case of the body, it just goes to the default browser font size. So if you go 1.2 ems, it's going to be 1.2 times the default font size. So if we just go save here, refresh, we can see font is now bigger. Now the thing is with ems, because it's based on the parent font size, they kind of stack up. So if we kind of put this same line in the UL styling, then the UL should go, okay, I want to be 1.2 times the body styling. So the ULs should actually be larger, even though 1.2 ems is the same specified for each of those there. So you can see, here we go, the UL font size is now much larger, or not much larger, but larger than our regular body text size. So font size, ems are pretty cool. At the time of recording, ems are kind of preferred. Pixels and points, so that's px and pt. So we could do something like 12 pixels. Reload. There you go, pretty small pixel size font. Or I don't know, like 14 pt. Refresh and bam, kind of what you'd expect. Pixels, points, and ems are really the most common there, or rems are starting to come in, but I don't want to talk about those quite yet. And okay, let's move on. Number 4, line-height. Simply the height of each text line, and once again you can use a bunch of measurements for this one. Generally you want to use kind of the same thing that you use for your font size. Let's make use of ems here, so like 1.1 ems, and let's go line-height, and you just want to give this a value for the height of each line. So in this case, let's go a little larger than the font size. Let's go like 1.5 ems. It might be a little bit extreme. Let's also go back to our HTML here and just paste in some kind of filler text. Oops. I thought I had some on my clipboard, I did not. Just like that, just so we can really see the effect here. So without the line height, let's just refresh the page, and now we put the line height in at 1.5 ems, and we refresh. You can see here we go, now the height of each line is much larger, and just to make sure you can see that, let's increase it to something crazy, like 3 ems. Reload, wow, the height of each line is massively big. So line height, pretty simple. Again, it's quite necessary, because if you don't give your text kind of space to breathe, but also kind of to be readable, then it's not going to look very nice. So line height, very, very important. And a quick aside, as our next property, the font property can actually send the font family, the font size, and the line height all in one shorthand. So what we can do is we can just go font, and then we can do the font size followed by the line height, and then our font family list just here. So in this case, we can say, okay, we want the font size to be 1.1 ems, we want a line height to be, let's decrease it to something more sensible, like 1.2 ems maybe, and our font family, we'll just copy our list from up here, and that is exactly the same as all these 3 lines. So it's kind of nice to be able to compress it down like that. If we just remove this, we should see it's much the same, apart from we change the line height, so it's going to look much more sensible. But it's much the same, all in one property, which is good. And next up we have text-align. So text-align simply aligns your text in a certain direction. You're probably used to this in word processing programs and the like. So text-align, we can give it a value of left or right or center or justify, and you should be familiar with what most of those do. Justify is just making each line of equal length. Center is obviously going to center it, left is going to align it to the left, right is going to align to the right. So if we just say let's just say sure, justify, save and reload, we can see the lines are now of equal length. That might not be very easy for you to see those, so let's use something like center, which you should be able to see much more clearly. Here we go, all the text is now centered, and the bullets are kind of weird when the text is centered because the bullets stay to the left and the text gets centered, but oh well, we'll talk about that some other time in more detail probably. So text align, pretty useful. Again, very necessary. Most of this text styling stuff, very, very important in the bigger picture here. Although, in contrast to that, a little bit less important these last two, but still very useful, we have text-decoration, and this kind of simply provides some kind of decoration to the text. So we can use an underline, an overline. I should just show you these. So underline is going to underline all the text. Overline, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to overline all the text. Line through, oh, I wonder what that's going to do. It's going to line through all the text. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do stuff like this on your body in general. Most of the time, text decoration is not used on the body. In fact, I'll show you a quick use for it in just a second here. And of course, none is very common as well. It's kind of got some default here. And talking of the none, if we just take this out here and use it on our links, so links by default have an underline text decoration. So if we just want to go to our A selector here and just be like, yeah, also don't have a text decoration, then our links will no longer have underlines. So if you don't like your links having underlines or whatever, then you can do that. Or some people like having it so on hover, the underlines disappear. So perhaps if we do that rather than having a sort of traditional hover color change like that, we can refresh, then here we go, the underline now disappears on hover because we go from the text decoration of underline, which is by default on our anchor element, and on hover we set the text decoration to none, just like that. So I think that's probably one of the most common uses for text decoration, actually dealing with links. And the final property we're going to talk about this in this tutorial is text-transform. So I'm sorry I've kind of rushed through these, we'll summarize in a minute. So text transform, and again, you probably wouldn't want to use this on the body, to be honest, so let's use, in fact, no, we haven't done about that. Okay, let's just do it straight here. Text transform, and you can give this a value of uppercase, of lowercase, or of capitalize, just like that. If we save and reload, it's just going to kind of transform all the text into a specific case. It's mostly used for case. So if we want to go text transform uppercase, you would never do this on the body. reload. Now all of the text in our body is going to be in uppercase. Now again, this is usually used in very specific places. I wouldn't say links, that's probably some way to use them, but just to show that all links are in uppercase. You probably wouldn't do that. Maybe for navigation links on a website, so you specifically sort of target the anchor elements that are in some sort of navigation section. Maybe you'd want those to be capitalized, or maybe uppercased, or maybe lowercased, depending on the style. So text transformer is useful in very specific cases. As with text decoration, really, you're not going to use it everywhere, but to be honest, these start ones, font size, line height, font family, and text align are, and of course color, are very, very vital, pretty much for everything, to be honest. So those are all the properties that I wanted to go over in this tutorial. I'm sorry I've kind of rushed through them, but really it is just you sort of having to learn a bunch of properties and a bunch of values. Of course, it's kind of interesting because you can just play with these, and that's what I recommend doing with this. I recommend start your own little document and just have a play around with different properties. Try changing up the font size, and the line height, and the fonts, and the text align, and mess around with text transform and text decoration, and colors, and using different formats of colors and different measurements for the font size and line heights and all that. And let's have a very, very, very quick recap. We have our color property. We can set it to a hex value, an RGB value, or a word value. We have our font family, which in this case we're using in our font shorthand. But pretty much you just specify, oh sorry, it's here, in our font shorthand, and we just simply write a list of fonts, and it goes, okay, if they have this font, use this. If they don't have that, use the next one in the list. If they don't have that, use the next one in the list. We have our font size, many measurements. We're using ems, which we've talked about previously. 1.1 ems in this case is going to be the size of the text in our body, and the line height we've set to 1.2 ems. That's line hyphen height, and that's the name of the property. And that just specifies the height of each text line. We also have text align. We can set it to left, right, center, or justify. And of course that's going to do what it sounds like really. Center is going to text align to the center, left is going to text align to the left, or align the text to the left, sorry. We have text transform, which you can set to lowercase, uppercase, capitalize, or none. We couldn't really think of a good use case for, to be honest, but you can uppercase, lowercase, capitalize, or just not transform your text at all, which to be honest is what you want to do most of the time. Or text decoration, where you can have underline, overline, line through, or none, and we use this with regards to links to get rid of the underline when hovering over a link. So we can just save and just recap our page here. We've actually used some kind of complex sort of font techniques in this tutorial and different text styling techniques. So I recommend you have a play around with these. If you can't remember the properties, just rewatch this video or take a look at the related text tutorial. So if you're viewing on YouTube, the related text tutorial is in this video's description, or if you're viewing on the website, the related text tutorial is just below where this video is embedded. So that is the end of this tutorial. Sorry we kind of just had to rush through a few properties, but it's necessary now and then when learning CSS, and have a nice day.